Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Monday afternoon and I'm delighted to be joined by James Mackenzie and Amy Canavan after a hard-fought one on Saturday. We'll be talking about that game. We'll be looking ahead to Wednesday's game and everything else in the world of Celtic. Before we get going, do you think we should announce who the guest is going to be at the Acsom live event in January?
Because there's so much stupidity over it. Nobody knows who it could be. God, you've kept this one so under wraps.
You know what it is, Amy, right? When the VIPs come in, they're all going to be given a chocolate eclair. That's why we posted the picture of the cake. Yes, we are going to be going live next year, 2023. You can come and meet those people that you only see on the little screens on your telephones or your tablets. And that's going to be happening in January. That's the first event up at Gracie's. I'm pretty sure you'll be aware of the place. It's a cracking venue. It's a really, really tremendous venue, actually. And we will have a different guest every single month. So let me have a look. How do I do this now? Who could it possibly be? There we go. Let's have a look. Any surprise there?
I am shocked.
It is the bold Brian McClare who will be joining us on the stage at Gracie's, and it's on the 20th of January 2023. Now, you two will be far too young to remember Brian McClare, but you'll be well aware of him. And the one thing that you will be aware of is the fact that he's got a tremendous sense of humour, so we're going to be in for a few laughs on the night. Who would you like to see on that stage in 2023? I'll come to you first, Amy.
Joe Ledley.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. Joe Ledley would be a fantastic guest.
He would be a fantastic guest. I think similarly to like Brian McClare, obviously he's got the podcast inside behind him now, or obviously still doing it. But like Joe Ledley's been doing a lot more media work, and I think he comes across great. And that's not just my bias, but no, I think he'd be brilliant. And yeah, a few stories to be told for sure. He was at the club during an interesting time.
Yeah, and absolutely
and a successful time. Of course.
Yeah, tremendously. As you will see on the poster, it is sold out. We sold out 6 days after announcing it on the socials. We had been speaking about it, of course, on the Acsom Bulletin. If you want to be part of a future event, then you can still click on the link and leave your details there, and we'll let you know when we open up the tickets for February's. What about yourself, James? Who would you like to see on the stage next year with Acsom?
If we're thinking about players with stories, maybe somebody like Aidan McGeady would be a pretty interesting one. It would be a hard shout because he's still playing. But I've seen him on podcasts like Open Goal, and he's always got some good stories.
Good shout, yes. There are a whole host of players who probably are at that stage where they're just about to start doing a little bit more media work. So we'll see what we can do. But there you go, Brian McClare. I'm absolutely delighted that he'll be joining us on the stage for a live show like no other, because it's not just sitting down, Q&A for an hour, raffle, auction, and then guest speaks to audience. It's going to be a wee bit different. But you'll need to come along and find out what we mean by that. Okay, Celtic 2, Motherwell 1. We're going to pick away at that result. I'm going to start off with yourself, James. Kyogo opens the scoring. I've heard a lot of talk about Kyogo. You obviously see it on social media regarding his form. I'm a wee bit concerned, it's got to be said, that we don't seem to have enough backup when he, Giakoumakis, or both are injured. It looks as though Giakoumakis might be coming back for Wednesday. But I was having a wee look at his record this season. After coming to us for £4.86 million, that's quite specific, coming in from Japanese football. So this season, he's made 10 appearances, scoring 7 goals, which is a goal every 87 minutes when you look at the actual minutes on the park, which is astonishing. Last season, 33 appearances, 20 goals, 5 assists. So he was involved in a goal every 86 minutes. So what you can say about this guy, when he's on the park, Celtic will score a goal a game. And again, he proved that. Again, it's not the most astonishing goal you'll ever see, James, but he was there at the right place at the right time. Is it a myth that he's off form when you look at the stats?
Yeah, it's only really came in recently, this criticism of Kyogo. When you look at the last few games Celtic have played, Rangers, he comes off with the shoulder injury after, 2 minutes? Yeah. So he didn't really get a chance to make an impact there. In Real Madrid, he got, 20 minutes when we were already 2 or 3-0 down. And in the games he's played in the league, he got was a hat-trick against Dundee United, including a phenomenal goal, and he's scored again today in a 2-1 win. You're really nitpicking and really looking for something to complain about. It's just frustration over sort of games where we're not completely blowing teams away, but you get these games sort of every season. You get a few of these games every season, and people like to just pick a player to pick on, and I think it's completely unwanted in my opinion.
I'd agree with that, because I think that what we've seen from Kyogo last season and at the beginning of this season, Amy, is someone who I think would be an absolute nightmare to play against for a lot of the Scottish defences. He was beating offside traps. He was getting in about the goalkeepers where they were taking a touch. I think there's going to be a goal this season, at least one goal where he catches the goalie out. And his performances for me have been as is. And I think when you look at the minutes on the park, this season he's scoring a goal every 87 minutes. Last season he's involved in a goal being scored every 86 minutes. My only concern really is the backup situation. As James said, there have been occasions this season and last where he's been injured. But what do you think about the furore over Kyogo? We'll come back to some of the other players who have been getting it tight since Saturday, but surely Kyogo has some credit in the bank as well.
Yeah, it's not like a total crisis, is it? I think James was spot on that, it's still coming. You don't know how fully fit he is, because it is sort of niggling injuries every few games still, which is a concern, as you rightly said. But I don't think it's, I'm trying to word this rightly. It's not even the fact that he's not being clinical enough. It's just almost that something's just maybe half a second, half a yard off at times. I think you could see that at the weekend. There was early headers, there was early runs, trying to break through the defence. It's just the finest, the details, and refining them really. And a little bit sharpness still. We're still only just into October, and I know some will say, oh well, it's 3 months into the season now, but our season did start later this year than any other, thanks to not having Champions League qualifiers or any kind of European qualifiers. So it's not an excuse, but I think it's just that, there's just a little bit of sharpness required, but I think that's across the team as well. I don't think it is just Kyogo, and I think as Ange has always said, it's not just relying on one man to score the goals. And again, I understand that's what you're saying, but it's it's asking Matarelli to chip in, Maeda to chip in, Jota to chip in as well. So I think it's a little, I think it's largely ridiculous that any sort of criticism that he's getting. He's still getting in and around these positions. His timing, I saw a comment there that his timing's perhaps maybe off, and that's probably the best way to sum it up. But he's still getting into those positions. It's maybe just half a yard, half a second wrong either way. But he still had a ridiculous amount of chances at the weekend, and just not putting them away. But they will eventually. Yeah,
I mean, there was one glaringly obvious chance that he missed, and we'll get into that because I've seen a lot of the comments over the last 48 hours, James, talking about had we taken our chances, it'd be 4 or 5-1, no one would be worried about the defence. I'm not so sure about that, because I think after the game, certainly if you're doing the Acsom post-match, as soon as that final whistle blows, we're going live. You're talking about what you've just seen unfold in front of you. And it wasn't a fantastic performance, so you can't really say that it is. But one thing I would be really averse again to is the knee-jerk reaction of Kyogo's no good, Juranovic is no good, etc., fill it in the blank. But if someone's played badly, or if they've made mistakes, then you're going to have to discuss them. I think Kyogo, my concern, as I said earlier, is at the moment he's the only striker. Giakoumakis, we expect, will be back for Wednesday. But does this suggest, do you think, that we need another striker? And I know Abada can fill in, Maeda can fill in, Haksabanovic can even play through the middle. And we've seen Jota playing through the middle. I don't think he started there, but he certainly spent some time in that position. Do we need another striker? Are you happy that if those two guys are unavailable, we can get one of the wingers to step in?
Well, obviously it wouldn't be your most ideal scenario. I remember back in the summer I was saying I was happy with the two strikers that we had already, but the same injuries sort of concerns that we had last season are starting to creep up again. And we're going to end up in a position where they're both injured, and Liel Abada's playing for the middle or something like that, and you don't want to be in those positions. Maybe we should have signed a striker in January. Would we sign a striker on loan in January? Maybe, but I'd say if you're looking ahead to the transfer window, maybe going for another striker could be a possibility.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there were those concerns last season. I remember the discussion we had, and you were quite happy with what we've got. And I can see from the club's perspective saying, well, we've got 3 other guys who can play through the middle, but I don't think they've got the same clinical nature. I think we saw that when Maeda came in against Real Madrid, and he's got that chance first couple of minutes of the second half. And
don't remind me.
Yeah, exactly. And we know what happened there. So quite happy then, the pair is for Wednesday night for Kyogo to lead the line. If Giakoumakis is fit, do you play him? How will Ange play that? We'll start with yourself, James.
Yeah, I'd be fairly happy with Kyogo playing for the middle against Leipzig. If I remember the game against Leverkusen away, back when we played in the Europa League, and Kyogo, he was very good. I think he assisted Jota's goal that put us 2-1 up. So he's played decently against German teams in that sort of style of football. His movement could be sort of very important for us against a team that plays a very high line. So I would be very happy with Kyogo playing up front.
Yeah. What about yourself, Amy? I mean, the chat is that Giakoumakis will be fit for Wednesday night. The bigger concern is Cameron Carter-Vickers, who we'll come on to. If both are fit, who do you start with up top?
I've been a long advocate of European games for Giakoumakis, but I think James is spot on. You know, saw a little bit of Leipzig recently, and Marco Rose is trying to play that slightly higher line, and you can understand why in the German league. So yeah, I think for that reason, because of what you're playing against, I think it's perfect for Kyogo. And I know we're talking about timing, so maybe it's a good time to get that on the ball. But no, I think that he's the kind of player that can get in and around, and his ball playing sort of tight positions is going to be more instrumental than Giakoumakis. I don't think that his physical game will really suit or would fall into the hands rather of Leipzig. I don't think that's the best way to break them down. But yeah, if he's fit, you're still wanting a good 20 minutes, half an hour out of him, no matter what, just to shake things up.
Yeah, for sure. Jungle Lion, welcome back to the show. You're on the YouTube. Cameron Carter-Vickers has been a huge loss. I think that the last couple of games has identified just how pivotal he is, if we didn't realise it already. But you go on to say, we just need one performance to click back into gear. And you know, I totally get that. I don't think we've become bad players or a bad team overnight. I just think it's that period of the season where you've gone a couple of games and we've really not been firing on all cylinders, and what better time to blow away the cobwebs than on Wednesday night against Leipzig. The Urban Culture comes in on the YouTube to say the best form of defence is attack. This has to be the motto for this game, and I think that's a lot of the time that is what Ange Postecoglou's philosophy is. Paddy, yes, this probably came in before we showed the graphic of Brian McClare, who is a special guest for January. It's going to be a great night. I'm really looking forward to it. And as I say, we like to do things a wee bit different. I know that there's probably another 20 broadcasts that look very similar to Acsom, but when we did it back in the day, it was a wee bit different. And the live event is going to be a bit different as well. So come along in January and you'll see what we mean. And if you come in January, you want to come back in February to see how the thing progresses for sure. And be ready to get involved. If you want, we won't force you, but you will get a chance to get involved with the guest as well. I want to move on to Juranovic, because just before we came on live, James, you mentioned some of the knee-jerk reaction on social media in relation to Juranovic, who all of a sudden has dropped down the pecking order behind Anthony Ralston, who's no longer good enough to be attracting interest from the likes of Chelsea. Amy and I obviously were on that Monday that, Fabrizio Romano was telling us that Juranovic was on his way. We were all delighted that he didn't move. All of a sudden, after an own goal, because I'll tell you what, I'm failing to see what else in that performance was poor by Juranovic. He was one of the most, the players with the most intent on that park. You look at some of the things he did. He hit the bar just before the own goal on 34 minutes. He shoots over on 57 minutes. He lines up Maeda in the 13th minute, and he lined up O'Reilly on the 56th. So 2 goal-scoring opportunities and 2 chances created by a right-back. Yet, because there's a mishap at the back, the world goes off its head about Juranovic not being a good player anymore. All a bit over the top, I thought, James.
Yeah, it was unlucky not to be on the score sheet for us instead of the own goal when he hit the crossbar for the free kick. But as I was saying earlier on, it was a frustrating performance. It was a hard game to watch. So people just really need to vent out their frustrations after a game like that. And unlucky for Juranovic, he was the one that made the error which led to the Motherwell goal. So it seems like all the frustration's been taken out on him. But I thought it was, apart from that mishap, a pretty composed performance. I thought he was fairly solid at the back for us, and he was unlucky not to get himself on the score sheet. But I think if we look ahead to the game against Leipzig during the week, I would still be starting Josip Juranovic. I think an error like that, a moment of madness, shouldn't be enough for him to be dropped from the Celtic team. So to say, I would still have him in.
You know, the biggest challenge, just before I come to yourself, Amy, that I think he's faced this season was against Shakhtar Donetsk. I think he was up against a player who, you know, in 3 or 4 years' time, we're going to see him at one of the big guns, I think, in European football, Mudryk. And people going about him being burnt that night. Yeah, he was burnt for the goal, but I don't think over the piece that he had a bad game that night as well. But, you know, this is something Alan Morrison brings up quite a lot of the time, where as football fans, as armchair fans, we seem to remember the really positive or the really negative rather than the entire performance. And I don't think Juranovic played too badly against Shakhtar, and I don't think he played too badly against Motherwell. As I say, he was fully intent. He gave us a lot of attacking options. And, you know, when I see Juranovic making that burst down the right-hand side, I think that he can completely change the tempo of our play. And he did that a number of times on Saturday. My view on Juranovic has not changed. Has yours, Amy?
God, no. I don't even know if he's particularly at fault for that either. And I'm not saying, you know, we'll come on to Joe Hart, I'm sure, as well. But I do think if anyone's in the wrong in that situation, it's Hart. Because if he's coming out with one, he should be shouting and making sure that Juranovic and all in front know that he's coming out for it and that he's not still on his goal line where Juranovic obviously thought he was. And it's just a complete freak moment. You know, it's not even a terrible piece of play or anything like that. It's a genuine freak moment that happens once in 100 games. It's actually a really nice chest down as well. It's probably one of the best goals he'll score. But it's not worthy of, you know, it's not even, I don't even think it is a lapse in concentration, because like I say, I do think that Joe Hart should be controlling and commanding his area a little bit more, and Juranovic should be under no, you know, two doubts where Joe Hart is. And obviously if he has came flying out like that, he should be screaming, and he's a vocal guy anyway, so there's not a lot of excuses for that. So yeah, I think it is a massive overreaction to Juranovic. He'd be a huge loss, and that's even me being Tony Ralston's biggest fan. But the zip that Juranovic has on his passes, the speed that he gets up and down the byline, you know, his work rate is second to none. I don't know many, probably other than Hatate, who actually work harder than him in a game. You know, he is up and down that wing in timely fashion. So yeah, I think it's crazy. There's just no way he's getting dropped, to be honest. There's just not.
No. And as much as I love Ralston as well, I can identify that Juranovic, in terms of his overall attributes, is a better option. There are going to be times this season where you think this is a game for Tony Ralston and he'll come in and perform the way he does. But Juranovic is the first pick and should also be the first pick on Wednesday night. Talking about work rate there as well, we will come on to Rio Hatate, because, you know, I think his season so far has been sensational. But there was a wee blip at the weekend as well, and one that he apologised for. But we've brought up Joe Hart.
Do you drop Hatate? Do you know what I mean? Do you drop Hatate? They're both kind of scenarios, and actually who's actually at fault, so to speak, more in those individual sort of circumstances. It's crazy. You're just not dropping either of them, are you?
Exactly. I think what we put the goal down to, and we're going to speak about Joe Hart, is basically it's poor communication, isn't it? I mean, as you say, Juranovic brings it down really well, and it's a simple wee chest back to the goalie. If the keeper picks that up, you're thinking, what a tremendous piece of defensive play that was under, you know, really cool. A cool head by Juranovic, but there's no communication. Joe Hart thinks that he's going to leave it, so he's running behind him and he's planning to throw the ball and trying to get an attack started. So just really, really bad communication. Whereas the Hatate situation, obviously, it's an error. It's an error that's all on him. It's resulted in our captain getting sent off, and he'll need to serve a ban for the sending off. We'll talk about the sending off as well. And he's apologised in the dressing room, isn't he? Which is something a lot of footballers, I think, they'll either be wallowing. He's going
to be so remorseful, isn't he? He's going to be like absolutely devastated.
Sitting in a darkened room watching it on loop, on repeat. Must not do it. Well, the thing is, though, if you're looking at that pass, just on the back of it, look at that pass against Real Madrid from Juranovic's throw-in, which was doing the rounds on social media as well, where he's just first time rattled the ball and completely changed the whole shape of the game by crossfield passing the way that he does. Joe Hart, though, two things I want to talk about. First thing is the goal, of course. Is it not about time? By the way, James, what I would say, losing a goal like that under those circumstances, you want to do that in a 2-1 win against Motherwell at home. You don't want to be talking about this on Thursday in the Bulletin because we've just done it and sold the jerseys against Leipzig on Wednesday night. So that's squared away and we can move on from it, but you hope that we do learn from it. Have you any concerns about the commanding nature or lack of over the last couple of games of Joe Hart?
Yeah, I was going to make the point earlier on. I thought Hart was fairly solid coming to collect the ball from crosses. That's why that sort of error from Juranovic and Hart that led to the goal was so shocking, because Hart was collecting the ball very well. But then again, even in the St Mirren game, when we lost 2-0 sadly, Joe Hart, he should have came for a few of the crosses in those games as well. But it seems like some games he does come and get the ball and he does pretty well, but in other games he doesn't. It's just really confusing.
I mean, again, I seen the reactions, Amy. Siegrist in, drop Hart, all this kind of stuff. It was happening straight in at the full-time whistle, and then you see it on the socials as Saturday turns into Sunday. And I thought to myself as well, right, okay, well, I'm not dropping Kyogo, I'm not dropping Juranovic, I'm certainly not dropping Hart. I just think it's knee-jerk. He's a guy that, going into the Champions League, as we are on Wednesday, I'd need to actually compare his games against Callum McGregor's. He's one of the most experienced players we've got at that level and in that competition. When you look at his international pedigree, you look at the influence that he has on the team as well. But I just think in the last couple of games, and I don't know if it's because the defence has been getting changed up a bit and he doesn't have that same consistency in front of him, Amy. Last couple of games, he's been a bit off it. What's your thoughts on that? Is it just a temporary blip in Joe Hart's performances, or do you think there's something deeper? He needs to be more commanding in the 6-yard box.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think as much as we speak about, that defenders want that continuity with their goalkeeper behind them, it'll be exactly the same the other way around, especially when you've got a goalkeeper who is in the latter stages of his career and has been asked to start playing out from the back, playing a high line, literally playing as another centre half. And if he's not got those two guys that he's formed such a, last season we spoke so much about that triangle, the triangle of Starfelt, Carter Vickers and Hart. And now you've only got the tip of that triangle, and you've got a guy in Stephen Welsh. Yes, he'll obviously know because he's at least been at the club and been within the system, but Maurice Jens is just still in the door, so he's still familiarising himself with stronger foot and where he likes to pick up the ball and what kind of runs he likes to go on. So that has to be a key part of it. I don't think it's time to bring in Benji Siegrist just yet. I think that's another slight overreaction. I feel there's been a lot of them, and I think there's just a lot of overreaction just from the game in general. It wasn't a terrible game. As James said, rightly so, it's one of those that, they are league-defining wins, scrappy-ish wins. I know we were all wanting a huge response after St Mirren and, nobody more than me. But that's what we spoke about, that it was so tough that we had that international break coming at the worst possible time because you weren't getting that immediate response. So there was a lot of build-up to it being, this is going to be an absolute route from Celtic and it's going to be 5, 6, 7 and Motherwell won't know what hits them. But this is a Motherwell side as well who you can see they stuck to their game plan, and since Stevie Hammers came in they are very defensive minded, and you understand why. And they made it difficult, but Celtic still managed to break them down. And if they are more clinical, it's easily 5, 6. Kyogo could have had a hat-trick. Abada should have finished late on, even when we're down to 10 men. As you say, O'Reilly could have had a goal or two. Hatate's hits the crossbar. There's post as well. You know, there's a good few chances in there, and that's just right off the top of the head. So it wasn't a dreadful performance, and there's no need for, you know, a new goalkeeper, a new midfielder, and a new right back to all come in. It will click. Yeah, it maybe didn't click, but Celtic still saw it out. And yeah, you know, there's moments in the game that could have changed it prior to the red card. You know, there's penalty calls, claims, and you know, and if just one of those chances go in from, like I say, the head to Kilgore, or whatever it may be, nobody's stressing, and nobody would dare think, right, we should maybe drop Hart, we should maybe drop Hatate, and we'd all be laughing about this Juranovic, because it's a bit of a laugh. It's just one of those crazy situations, you know. It's not, like I say, it's not like a terrible piece of play or anything like that. Hatate's is more the switch off, but yet he was still played at the match, and rightly so, because he was still man of the match. So yeah, a little bit of an overreaction, I would say.
Yeah, without a doubt. Let's get some of the comments up on the screen. Tam Mac Paddy, I'm the special guest. Well, Tam, if you're at the gig, you may well be on the stage with the special guest, that's for sure. And Keith Octon, as he does on a regular basis, is joining us from Plymouth. It's sunny in your avatar. Is it sunny where you are? It certainly isn't up here in Dalkeith, that's for sure. And doom and gloom. Yeah, let's make sure it isn't doom and gloom on the Acsom Bulletin. Michael Ross, slightly panicking about Wednesday, to be honest. Well, we will be talking about the fact that they seem to be rejuvenated to RB Leipzig, but I keep thinking that, you know, the St Mirren and Motherwell games, we've got them out of our system. You know, it's not going to turn into something where we can't get out of the kind of rut. We've got them out our system, and hopefully we will see the real Celtic under Ange Postecoglou on Wednesday. Brown Warrior, also the resurgence of Leipzig's form makes it a triple whammy going into these games. Wouldn't be Celtic in the Champions League if it was easy. Absolutely right. And we have been looking back at some of the previous European games on the Acsom social. Some of the games that we've been looking at, things like Germinal Ekeren from 1991, Cologne, where we were able to turn around a 2-0 deficit and win at Celtic Park. That was Kev Graham's first European game, I think. The Cologne game, Borussia Dortmund, all these big names, and yeah, we will eventually have to cover Neuchâtel Xamax as well, because it did happen, unfortunately. Paddy Lavery wants to see Monty on the stage. Well, if he's in the crowd, and there is a chance he might be, then he can nominate himself. Whether or not Brian McClare chooses him is another matter, so we will see what happens on the night. We've been talking a wee bit about Hatate. I think he scored a fantastic goal in the 63rd minute on Saturday. It was a match winner, but of course the poor pass to McGregor is something that we've also discussed. Only 24 years of age. I had to double check this. We paid apparently under 1.4 million quid for this guy, you know, from Kawasaki Frontale. Now, this season, 8 games he's played, last season 21. Sometimes we overlook the fact that in terms of his Celtic career and overall his senior career, he's fairly inexperienced, James. So he's making mistakes. He's making the kinds of mistakes that an 18 or 19-year-old might be making when they've made like the amount of appearances that Hatate has made in senior football. And I think when I'm watching him, though, that I have been concerned about the likes of Juranovic with interest in the player from Chelsea, apparently. We've had O'Reilly with interest from Newcastle and Leicester. The one I'm worried about is Hatate, because I just think that when it comes to the crunch, when we're playing the likes of Real Madrid or we're playing Leipzig on Wednesday, he's really going to show up as the real deal. And he's the one that I'm concerned about. And when you look at that transfer fee, it's absolutely laughable. It's daylight robbery that we got this guy. How big is he on Wednesday night for us?
He's an absolutely phenomenal player. As you mentioned earlier, he's still fairly inexperienced the way Japanese football works with the university system. But he will be absolutely integral if Celtic want to get anything for the game against Leipzig. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal against Motherwell at the weekend. I thought, despite that pass back to McGregor, that was a big mistake, obviously, but he scores an absolute thunderbolt that inevitably wins us the game. Mm-hmm. So you'd be very hard to criticise him. You're not going to look back on that Motherwell game in January and be absolutely raging because Hatate missed that pass back to McGregor. I thought he was really lively as well, and you saw in the game against Shakhtar Donetsk away, it was his play that got us the goal. And it was probably, for me, our best player on the day, our best player in the midfield at least. So he'll be very, very important if we want to get anything. I don't know how you feel about the game against Leipzig, but I would take a draw. I think the home games are the games that are must win. I think we could afford to just get a draw in Leipzig.
I would listen. I asked the question after the game there, and it wasn't because of the couple of bad performances, but I think, Amy, that under the circumstances, earlier on this season they got hammered by Shakhtar Donetsk. We know that. We know that since then there's been a managerial change, but there's also been a change in fortunes. And I think, Amy, if we were to go into that game and come away from Germany with a point, then you are thinking, well, it's two tricky away games that we've got something from, and then you're hoping to get something from the home ties against Shakhtar Donetsk and RB Leipzig. What about Hatate then? What's your thoughts on the part he is going to play, not just domestically but in Europe? And on the one hand, you're delighted that that's going to happen, but the minute you're starting to put yourself in that shop window, you're not talking Leicester or Brighton or Newcastle. I think you're talking much bigger clubs will be interested in Hatate.
Yeah, God, yeah, the interest is going to come, and it's going to be pretty much like every club wanting Ange Postecoglou right now. It's just going to keep coming, but you just got to take it as flattery, and if you're doing it on the biggest stage, which you want them to be doing, it's just part and parcel with being where Celtic are in the sort of food chain of European and world football. It's just one of those that you've just got to enjoy while we've got him, because he is an outstanding talent, and the world really could be his oyster, because the way that he can control a game, his passing ability is unbelievable, and I think that's something that we love as well. So yeah, the passing ability is unbelievable. There was a slap pass at the weekend, but he's also got that pass that is rightly doing the rounds since the Real Madrid game, the first time pass from the Juranovic throw-in. He has that in his locker, and he's willing to try that. Who has the audacity to try that? As inexperienced as he is, first taste of that kind of level of football, and he pulls that out. It's terrific. It's so if he's doing that on his first, what's he going to do after a little bit of confidence and a little bit more comfortable? He can do whatever he wants, and as we saw at the weekend, he's got a mean strike on him as well, and that's not the first time. Anytime you see him kind of roaming around that area, I can't believe that there wasn't actually a Motherwell man tighter to him. There's one who's just nowhere near close enough. You're giving him half an inch, and he's going to be at least on target or in and around. His striking range is unbelievable, and it was a beautiful strike as well, just the way that it dipped and nestled in the net. It's such a tremendous strike. So it's just one of those, you've just got to enjoy it. There's so much of that and so much of those type of players within the Celtic side right now, but you can look too far in the future and get quite down about it, but I think you've just got to enjoy it in the moment, and who knows under Ange Postecoglou how long he can keep these sort of guys.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's cropped up, and we will be speaking at some point with Liam, who we think is our resident expert in Japanese football, is the fact that we've gone all this time, and you could kind of like bookend the legendary figure of Nakamura with the four Japanese players that were brought in, three of whom have made a massive impact so far. Kyogo and Hatate in particular, I would suggest, although Maeda obviously is a really important player for Ange as well. And you ask the question, well, Nakamura leaves Celtic in 2009, and we don't bring these guys until 2021. All the talent that must have existed in Japan within that period that we could have tapped into, but we didn't, and we could have tapped into it at the kind of prices that we're talking when you look at the prices that we've actually paid for the four players we've got. So it is something that we will be discussing with Liam, and Liam might be able to tell us some of the success stories, the what-if stories had Celtic kept that interest in the Japanese market, because you're not telling me that there hasn't been decent players since 2009 when Nakamura left the building. Ridiculiser, I don't know if it's a tactical thing, but Kyogo's pressing is nowhere near what it was last season. The only thing I can think of, I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, James, is what Amy was saying there about a kind of fitness thing, and I'm also going to relate that to the fatigue of the international situation. When these guys play international football, they're not sitting on a plane for a couple of hours. It's a big deal. It's like when we had Tommy Rogic, and when he's playing for Australia, there was always that thing that he's going to come back potentially with an injury, but also potentially with a bit of fatigue because of the travel and all this kind of thing. Do you think that plays into it as well as the niggling injuries that Kyogo's had, James?
I don't know. I think you would be really nitpicking if you're going to criticise him for something like that. I'd say if there's anything to criticise Kyogo about, it would be maybe the amount of chance that it takes for him to get a goal. Again, his goal scoring record is brilliant. As he mentioned, Box at 86 minutes per goal. That's absolutely phenomenal, but he still misses loads of chances. It was the same last season. He was our best player up until January, but the amount of chances he gets, it could have been on double that. That's just the way Kyogo is. If he's going to get us the goals, that's fine. But I'd say, if you're going to criticise him on anything, I'd say maybe his movement and maybe looking off the mark. I don't think he has. I think he's been as solid as ever up front for us.
Yeah, I mean, Amy, what's your thoughts on it? It is incredible. I used to just do appearances and goals, but then I heard that Alan says that the metric that you use is minutes. And then you start looking at Kyogo's performances and you think, wow, if he's on the pitch, we'll score a goal. That, the Loy averages over last season and this season. But, do you think he's changed his play? Is it down to the fact that, he has had some bad injuries since he came to Celtic, and he's had a couple of niggly injuries this season, but also the international football may play into it? What's your thoughts?
I don't actually know, which is a really great answer. I'm trying to think. I don't think it's. At
least you didn't say that's a really good question, because that's somebody just trying to think of an answer.
I don't think it has been as intense as last season. I don't know, maybe is it in his mind that, one burst and his hammy could go. I'm not too sure, but I don't think it's been noticeably, totally and utterly less. I'm really doing well here. Because this is why it's kind of thrown me, because I don't think that it is, I don't think it's totally, I've not went, oh wow, he's really not trying to break through the defence and really pressurising the goalkeeper as much. I also think, as with any player, it's a year now that opposition defenders have had Kyogo, and been able to sort of figure out how he plays. So you're going to try and block runs, and you're going to not play out from the back as much, and you're just going to get the ball away, because that's what he's going to want to do. So I think you've got to give a little bit of credit elsewhere as well. But no, I don't think it's a concern. And the fact that I couldn't even think of it, I think shows it's certainly not a concern for me. So maybe it should be a concern.
You talked your way out of that pretty well.
That's honestly, I'm a really, really good journalist.
You'll go far. Danielle, you're in. Welcome back. He's not clinical enough this season. I think the same could be said about Celtic as a whole. I mean, there's been occasions I thought we were clinical against Dundee United, obviously. There's been games against Ross County and Rangers. But I just think recently, but then again, even when we're scoring a lot of goals, people were mentioning on Acsom that Kyogo could score even more, because he was scoring a goal, but he was getting 2 or 3 chances in a game as well. So that's something that I see coming up time and time again. I was looking at this, Michael, this morning. One thing I've noticed about Ange, he's quite cagey about injuries, isn't he? He doesn't give much away. And I remember the Leverkusen game last season at Celtic Park. We were all sitting waiting at the park, and then McGregor and Kyogo start the game, and I think most of the stadium were a bit stunned by that. Fair play to him, by the way, because why give any kind of margin to your opponent by letting them know who is and isn't fit? But it would appear, Michael, that the concern is on Carter Vickers, and that Giakoumakis is far more likely to be fit. But again, who knows? Who knows when it comes to Ange as to what the situation is going to be and how much of that is mind games. Ian McMillan reckons too many of our fans jumping on the players' backs on Saturday. It was very evident and just doesn't help. I mean, there were some people who tuned into our post-match who thought we were a wee bit harsh on Welsh and Yents. So that leads us on nicely to the central defensive partnership. And what I would say about this is that I think, looking at both players, you've watched the progress of someone like Stephen Welsh coming in as a young guy, getting thrown in really at the deep end for that Rangers game, remembering Neil Lennon's last season in charge. I know it wasn't Welsh's debut, but it wasn't ideal throwing him in. I think there was an issue, obviously, at that time with quite a few injuries that we had. Klamala started that game as well. Where is he now? He was doing all right last time I heard. But, I look at Welsh, and I remember speaking to someone who's involved in youth football saying that this kid is a real prospect. He's got the distribution. And the thing that I think he's lacking at the moment, a wee bit of confidence, but it doesn't help when people jump on his back, totally get that, is the aggression. And I watched that game against Motherwell, James, right? And there's Van Veen and there's Louis Moult, right? Who are very good players at this level in Scotland. But I just think that this is the type of player he really needs to boss. He needs to boss that type of player because he's going to be up against them time and time again. And the minute you don't is when I think other managers identify that as some kind of a weakness. And I think within the first 20 minutes of the game, there's a cross comes in from the right-hand side, and he's beaten to it far too easily for me. And the way that he attacked the ball, he was always going to be second to it because his body shape's all wrong. His weight's on the back, which means he's leaning back. He's not actually approaching the ball in flight in the right body position. And I think that's a part of his game that he needs to improve. See, when he's got the ball at his feet and he goes for a run with it, Ayer-esque run, and he does that a lot to try and turn defence into attack. He looks very comfortable. I think distribution-wise, he's definitely better than Jens. But as a partnership, I'm not convinced with those two together. Now, we'll get on to Carter Vickers and his importance, but just as a partnership, I just don't think there's a leader between the two of them.
Yeah, that's the second game in the league in a row where a physical striker has bullied them, essentially. Curtis Main done it to good effect for St Mirren when they got the 2-0 win. And Kevin Van Veen done the exact same thing to Stephen Welsh at the weekend. I've never been Stephen Welsh's biggest admirer, but I think he's a very good passer out from the defence. But again, Van Veen, he caused them so many problems. I even thought he looked pretty hesitant with his passing out against Motherwell, which that's one of his best qualities. But some of the sort of runs, as you were saying, like Ayer, he's able to sort of turn us to attack, again, his distribution. But when you're looking to the Leipzig game, you've got to hope Cameron Carter-Vickers is fit. You've got to hope he's back because he is the main man in that Celtic defence. You can see how much confidence the rest of the team gets when Cameron Carter-Vickers, the presence he has, you can notice when Cameron Carter-Vickers isn't in that defence. There's no one there that's as good as him. So you're really hoping that he'll be back. I thought Maurice Jens, I thought he was the worst out of the two against Motherwell. Not Motherwell, Smurren, sorry. But I thought he'd done his job stepping out from the defence well. Some of his passes were maybe a bit off, but you would be nitpicking. I thought out of the two of them, maybe Welsh was the worst. And if you look at the St Mirren game, I thought Stephen Welsh was maybe the one that was a bit worse off.
You know, first game of the season, Welsh gets the nod, he scores the goal against Aberdeen. And he was brilliant that day. He really was. And what I was trying to identify is the way we play the game with regards to the amount of ball that the two centre-halves get every single game is because obviously we start from the back, and it's part of this mantra that Ange Postecoglou has, and Joe Hart plays it a lot to his centre-halves. But I don't think the distribution of Jens and Welsh is similar to the Starfelt and Carter-Vickers distribution, in that Welsh tends to get the ball and go for a jog with it. By the time he's made his distance up, the players who are normally getting into positions and creating a bit of space have been closed down. So then the options aren't there. If that's Carter-Vickers, he's just getting the ball and he's quickly moving it on. Starfelt doesn't keep the ball much, thankfully, and he moves it on very, very quickly as well, because I don't think it's his best asset, Starfelt, with the ball at his feet. So he gets it, and he moves it on. And I think that the minute you take that extra touch, 2 touch, and in Welsh's case, several touches, then the move and the intensity of the move, which is what Ange's play is all about, breaks down. And that's why I don't think we've been as fluid. So even when you've got your strongest midfield in front of you, which we did on Saturday, it's not as effective because they're not getting the ball as quick. He's also not missing out the midfield for the wingers as quick as the other two, the first choice, two at the back. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Would you be happy with those two on Wednesday night, Amy, starting the game? And because of the situation we're in this season, and we've been in that situation last season, do we need a centre-half in January to come in?
I don't think I'd be happy with the two of them on Wednesday, purely because I just, it's really boring, but I totally agree with everything you've just said. I'm just feeling myself nodding along because, which makes for a great podcast. But there's just a lack of zip, and it's just that little bit slower, and it's quite lethargic, and you get huffy. You get huffy watching Celtic in Europe anyway, because it's usually not going well, and it's just because it's just oh, come on. And it's just like that, right? Let's get going. But that's even worse and even slower with Jens and Welsh. And it's not necessarily their fault, but it's just not the way that they both play at their best. And a bit confusing as well, because, you know, when Jens first came in and we saw those cross-diagonal balls picking out Juranovic, who was making that run all the way up the other end of the pitch, and you know, Welsh, as James said, he's got one hell of a pass on him. He's got an eye for a pass, and he can really ping it around. But you just didn't see that at the weekend enough. And or as you say, when you did, you know, Jota was already man marked, Maeda was man marked, and you're just like, well, it's the moment has literally passed now. So it's just a little bit slower and a little bit more lethargic. So that's the worry, because you're going to have a Leipzig side who are rejuvenised, and you know, it's, I think the minute the draw was made, I said it to you, and that's without even the Shakhtar Cameron. I was like, this is going to be the worst time for us having them in the double header, because I didn't think our manager would have been sacked quite so soon, because I didn't see the Shakhtar result coming, but you knew he'd be gone by the time Celtic had this double header, because it's been a downward spiral at Leipzig, so it was always coming, and it was always going to be, you know, right, look, the longer they can kind of hold on to this really inept manager, really, and the better, because they've brought in a top class guy in Marco Rose, and you know, they're going to, that's the ideal what they're wanting to play against, a side who are a bit slow at the back, a bit passive with it, and they're just going to totally, you know, be on what we're asking Celtic to be right now, you know, Kyogo pressing and being on top and putting the defence under pressure. That's just what Leipzig will do, and it's what any good side would do against this centre-half pairing who, you know, as James says, you've had 2 league outings with them, so you've got 2 catalogues or 2 games to watch back in the catalogue, and that's what you're going to take out of that, is how slow that they're being against, Curtis Main, who I thought was very good against Celtic, but Van Veen and Molt didn't even actually need to be very good. You know, Molt's not the quickest, but he was still, you know, getting in and around. So yeah, it is a little bit of a concern. So let's just pray to God that Carter Vickers is fit.
Absolutely, that seems to be my response to everybody that's mentioning the defensive situation on the Facebook group. If you haven't joined that, by the way, get involved. 20,000 and growing on Facebook. Acsom. Strachan's laptop doesn't get much mentions this season, does it? Can't rush. Yakimak is back. Made that mistake last season with Kyogo, who hasn't been the same since. You reckon? Well, I would rather not rush him back. You're absolutely right, and I think that's why moving into January we probably will be looking at centre half, maybe a centre forward to strengthen it as well. And I seen someone commenting earlier on, if we were to move McCarthy on, because he seems way out the picture, it frees up the wages to maybe bring one of those players in as well. Now James Miller comes in to say Maeda was brought in as a striker. Yeah, Liam talks about Maeda as a centre forward in Japanese football, James, where he was very effective, but I don't really know what his best position is. Well, that's interesting as well, because he's another one. His game's all about energy, and it's about, you know, closing people down. But often we've seen him in front of the goal, you know, and he doesn't seem to have that instinct. So it's interesting that he was a centre forward. He was brought in as a centre forward, having played most of his senior career in that position. But I kind of view him more as a winger. And I don't know if you would agree with that, James. What's your thoughts on Maeda?
Yeah, it's strange, because for the Japan team, I'm pretty sure Maeda's preferred up front to Kyogo, which if you were to speak to most Celtic fans, they would very much disagree with you. But I thought Maeda against Motherwell, he was fairly lively. Thought he used his pace very smartly. Thought he got the better of his marker quite a lot. In the second half, he slightly fell off, but Ange, he recognised that. He made the change. He brought on Abada. For me, I see Maeda as a winger. There's been far too many big chances that we've seen him miss, and they always seem to fall in big games as well. The Real Madrid one was maybe sort of the nail in the coffin for him being a striker, but you could maybe say the miss against Shakhtar as well. But I thought he was fairly solid against Motherwell. I think the wing is his place. I've made the point quite a few times in the podcast. I don't think he's good enough on the left to force Jota out onto the right. I think he should be putting Maeda on the right to accommodate Jota on the left. But that's just my opinion. I see Maeda as a winger.
Yeah, you know, the thing is as well, you mentioned a lot of guys there like Jota. We've not mentioned Jota because he's had a real purple patch this season, Amy. But it's like they're taking a shot at the mantle, right? Kyogo's excellent for a few games. Hatate's brilliant. O'Reilly's brilliant. Jota's brilliant. But if that clicks and it all comes together, then we could go out there on Wednesday night and do exactly what Gary Madden is suggesting and winning away in Europe. Listen, I think if you know Carter Vickers is back in the side, that gives everybody in there a boost of confidence. And I think that includes Joe Hart. Despite everything he's achieved in the game, to have Carter Vickers running about without actually moving his arms, you notice that, it's just his legs that move. And it doesn't even look as though he's breaking a sweat. And he's got a great turn of pace, Carter Vickers. Deceptively fast over a 20, 30 yard kind of space as well. I think the minute that team comes out, if he's in it, we'll all be a little bit more buoyant, and hopefully Gary Madden is right. Now, I don't know if you're any relation to Bobby Madden, but let's talk about referees for a moment. And I'll come to you yourself, Amy, and we'll try to be as balanced as possible on this one. Right? Did you like that?
No.
That bridge into the sending off, the penalty, was it, wasn't it, and everything else that happened on the day. John Beaton is a referee that I don't rate at all. I think he's very poor. I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of Celtic fans have had, that I've certainly seen on the socials, is you compare the Ross County at Ibrox decision against McGregor against Motherwell on Saturday, and it's laughable, right? By the way, I think both of them are red cards, but it's laughable the level of inconsistency that you see. Callum McGregor playing the captain's role, Amy, taking one for the team, all these other cliches. He done what he had to do. But the argument that I was having with Colin, who can't join us today, but he will be back next week, is, and I think Ange Postecoglou agrees with Colin, is that Stephen Welsh was the guy. I think back to, remember Beaton get sent off at Ibrox, and there was the argument that we did have cover.
Yeah.
We could have closed it down. I think it's a wee bit different with this one. And I was going on about body shape and position, and the fact that Joe Hart was not only about 25 yards from goal, but he wasn't in the centre of goal. I do think it's a clear goal-scoring opportunity. Amy, over to you.
Yeah.
It's a sending off.
So it's Colin, because so Ange is a little bit like, I'm not sure. So is Colin saying this, because I'll just go back to Colin. Does Colin think that it's not a red card?
Yes. Colin and I were going to have a right good debate. We're going to have a right good ding-dong today, but he's not here.
No, it's Stephen Welsh only comes into the picture when Cal McGregor's actually already tugged Tierney. And that's how you can I assume, is where you're like, oh, look, he's about to cover. Because McGregor's already hauled the boy back. Yeah. And he's already, no 10 yards where he was going to be. No, it's a definite red card. And understand, and just obviously not want to come out and say, yeah, right, okay, it's a red card. But I actually would, because I would just come and say, well, that's probably as good a red card as you can receive. You're also not injuring the player in any way. You're just hauling him to the deck. You're not breaking your studs down the back of his calf or anything like that. It's a fantastic red card to take. And that's what I mean. It could be, season defining, league defining, whatever you want to say. For anyone who doesn't, if that is the other way around, if that's Kyogo, you are going absolutely berserk. We would have spent the whole hour speaking about it today, wouldn't we? And I know people are going to compare it to the Ross County one, but there's no comparing, because they're exactly the same. It was just a howler. So, Don Robertson shrugs the shoulders, which is just laughable. I was going to say something that I probably shouldn't say. It's just a terrible decision. But there's no comparing, because they're exactly the same. Yes, they've not had the same outcome, but they should have. And it is a red card. It's a fantastic one to take. You'd be furious if you never, because you can see it, you can see the danger. But yeah, it's Welsh isn't getting there. Come on, Colin. Come on, Ange.
Colin will be back on to defend himself. Hopefully he'll come on for the match day on Wednesday night. James, what's your take on it? Because, as soon as it happens, I'm thinking it's a red. Then you're watching all the playbacks and you're watching the replays. And exactly what Amy says, that example at Ross County just shows how bad our refereeing is, because that's as clear a red card all day as you'll see at Ibrox. But that's where the issue lies. I think that's where the frustration lies. And had it been Kyogo running through on goal and the Motherwell player brought him down, I'm not convinced Celtic would have got the red card. I don't think Motherwell would have had a player sent off, and that's the issue. But it was a red card, right?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that was a red card. Cal McGregor took one for the team, as he said. It's one of my favourite things in football when it works out well. A tactical red card, just taking someone out, taking one for the team. When the team goes on to win, it's hard to find something better than that in football.
Yeah, it's like the guy on the line saving the ball. giving away a penalty and getting sent off. There's a glimmer of hope that your goalie might actually save the penalty kick. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Some of you are still talking about the old 90s European endeavours Neuchâtel Xamax was at Celtic's Pearl Harbor. Xamax were actually managed by Roy Hodgson at that time, who went on to manage Inter Milan and Liverpool, and he's still in the game, isn't he? Roy Hodgson's still managing. Did he retire?
I think he retired, and that was and it was like a big, beautiful moment.
Yeah. I mean, some of the memes are tremendous with Roy Hodgson as well. Talking about at some point he managed Watford, didn't he? And you see big Bio scoring for Watford at the weekend. Wow, bring back Bio. No, you're all right.
No club in England Roy Hodgson's no had some sort of affiliation with.
Yeah, I know.
And you know, go through a manager every 6 weeks, so
unbelievable. You certainly wouldn't take that. By the way, we probably should have a list.
I saw that. Was like,
what was that, mate?
It was like Watford have more managers in the last 10 years than West Ham have had in about 60 years or something like that. It might even be in West Ham's history. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, they're going for the old Hibs kind of approach at the moment. But we could probably have a list of the English teams behind us on the Acsom Bulletin and just score them off. What we had so far: Leicester, Wolves and Brighton, teams that Ange is going to leave Celtic for, and we'll probably end up with about a dozen by the end of the season. Alan Robertson, Dynamo Batumi, if you were at that game, you're one of very few fans who were away from home, that is. And the programme for the away leg is one of the most rare Celtic programmes of all time, because there were so few players and so few fans at the game as well. But I don't know if it was too early for Paul the Tim, but there was a few fans who made it to the game, that's for sure. We've spoken about the sending off. Some interesting comments from Chris Julian. I had a wee look at the interview that he did over the weekend, talking about the relationship, first and foremost, that he had with Ange. I think it was Facebook status, it's complicated between him and Ange. But what I found interesting was he was talking about Ange's approach to video analysis and the fact that it's like a game of chess, James. So we're learning a wee bit about Ange all the time, but he's looking for weaknesses and he's looking to exploit those weaknesses in the other side. And I think that so far, and you could probably say the same about last season, it's faring pretty well in Europe, isn't it? Particularly away from home. And I think that kind of analysis, it doesn't surprise me, but it's the first that we've heard about Ange Postecoglou embracing, video technology to try and breach any kind of defensive systems that a team might have. Were you surprised at Julien's comments, and are you growing to love Ange the more and more you find out about him?
Yeah, it was good to hear what Julian was saying in the media. As you know, I led the campaign for Christopher Julian to stay at Celtic all summer, just for him to leave in the last 2 weeks. But it's good that Ange is using the sort of video footage. It's the way football is going. It's the right way forward. That's how you should be scouting teams. Show your players the actual footage. This is how you attack this team. This is how you get behind. These are the players to watch. This is what they can do. Because there's no better example for a team to see before they play someone than the actual video footage right there in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking again to a football coach who I was asking them about this, Amy, and how effective it can be. I mean, and the response I got is that some managers buy too much into it, so that, for example, the presentations they do are too in-depth because you can't give too much information to individuals. And I don't mean footballers because they don't have the capacity, just anyone. You can't overload them with information, because then they're second guessing a lot of their own kind of instincts on the park. However, if you give them enough in terms of weaknesses, etc., it can be hugely differential in terms of the performance and the outcome of the game. How impressed are you that Ange has got this as part of his game plan as well?
Yeah, there's certainly there's no excuse to not have it in any kind of capacity, because it's the world is your oyster. There's all these platforms. I'm on a few of them as well, and you literally it breaks it all down for you. You don't even actually need I'm not the techiest person in the world, but if I want to go and look at this individual player's crosses, I'll get just all the crosses he's had in that game, and this software, this platform does it for me. Don't want to promote it because I'm not getting an advertisement for it. But it's there's all of these. There's no reason now why it can't sort of be a part of it. But you're spot on, because you can get lost in a rabbit hole with it. You can be on it until like 3 a.m, and it's like TikTok. You don't know what you were doing beforehand because you just get so intense in it.
Amy, I am not on TikTok.
Oh, you need to get on TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok, and I'm not on Instagram.
Literally,
they're too cool for me, man.
Oh, I'm not on Instagram either, actually. I'm not on Instagram, but I'm on TikTok.
So there you go, right? So I don't have that addiction that you're talking about. So
I've got a TikTok addiction for sure.
Is it not just all a lot of nonsense?
Aye.
James is laughing.
It is. But
James,
you just keep watching, you can't stop.
Who doesn't have a TikTok addiction? You can't, like, if the minute you create an account or be a guest,
you know what? Right, use that as an example, right? So TikTok, it's all about short, sharp, tiny wee bits of information. Am I right? And that goes to the point we're trying to make there about, receiving information and retaining it. And we're now in I don't know if it's always been the way, but we're now in a situation where we're in an environment where everything has to be almost instant gratification, move on to the next bit. So you can't overload the players with instructions. You've got to try and keep it as simple as possible. But if you can see it in plain sight in front of you on the video, and you're identifying this is what this defender does wrong, if you approach it like this, is going to create the opening, I think fantastic. And, it was one of these things, I think back, video, it's not a new thing, is it? They used to do it back in the day when European travel wasn't as simple as it is now. And yeah, they might go and see a game away from home, but also they were relying on games and sitting there and watching it and trying to identify what the opposition was doing. We're coming up, we're actually over an hour. Thanks everybody for getting involved, 500 strong. You may not have watched it at the beginning, but we did announce earlier on that Brian McClare is going to be our first guest in January for Acsom Live at Gracie's. It's a live event like no other. It is sold out before we even announced Chalky. But if you're interested, click on the link underneath this video and we will let you know when the February one is going to be announced. We're going to have a different player every single month, and it is a wee bit different. Also, we're up for a Football Content Award. We like to show what we've won on the right hand side of the screen there because it triggers the right people. We're up for another one. We've been announced recently as being up for the Video Creators Award. So if you want to vote for us and give us a right good night down in Manchester, then vote. It's underneath again. Just click the link. And also one final thing that we like to help the people that help us. So we've got someone to plug here, Amy. We like a bit of music on the show here and there. And we're going to plug this big fella here. This is Bems. Look at that retro away kit. He's a good guy, Bems. Bems came to our launch up at Edinburgh. He played at our launch, he DJ'd, and he's been working with Dictator as well. And as you can see, he's got taste. He's up for a SAY award, so he's up for the Album of the Year in Scotland. So all you need to do is visit him or me or Acsom on the socials and click the link. Give him a wee vote if you desire, because we've got some amount of talent coming through in Scotland. Amy's pal Brooke Combe, who obviously is absolutely smashing it. And what I notice about all these talented individuals is they're all Celtic fans. Incredible. So there you go. Thanks everybody for getting involved. We will be back tomorrow with the troops. Natasha won't be on because she's maybe going to be somewhere else watching a football game.
No way, Natasha on a plane? I'm not having it. No way. God.
Well, yeah, there is an award actually on the chat group for anyone who can travel further than Natasha in a pre-season. I mean, she was getting around more destinations than Jota in the pre-season just past. So we will have our Acsom team of sorts tomorrow, and of course we will be back for the game on Wednesday night. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to James and Amy for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.